you got to realize that whatever you're doing, you're competing with somebody. What is it that gives you an advantage over your competition? Whatever you're good at, try to be great at it. And if you're great at it, good things will happen.
I'm far from average. That's why I had to come sit down and chop it up with DJ Maverick. They know my name from coast to coast and even in Dallas. I use my talent when I'm faced with a challenge. Gratitude strength is my magnet. Close your eyes and imagine. If you can see it in your mind, then you can have it.
Maverick Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. This is a Maverick Podcast. I'm your host, DJ Maverick. Today, we have another super episode. We have the founder and chief multiplier of Rooted in Leadership, the one and only Ashley McCormick. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Before we dive into everything, for the 1% of the people out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, there's lots of facets to Ashley. I am a wife and a mother of 2 children. I also have a brand new puppy, so I'm a dog mom.
Awesome. Congrats.
I don't know if that's a congrats or not.
What type of puppy?
He's a golden doodle.
Oh, very cool. Those are cool.
Yeah. Also a gardener and love to read books. And then, like you mentioned, I own my own business.
Yeah.
So I'm an entrepreneur, a trainer, and a coach.
Very cool. So you call yourself a chief multiplier. What does that mean?
The way that I do business is much different than the way that a lot of people do business. So a lot of times people are like, let me get in there and let me stay within a company. My goal is really to be able to get in, help people get where they want to go and give them the resources to then be able to utilize those from there on out.
Very cool.
So the reason why I call myself a chief multiplier is because I'm giving them the tools and the assets that they need to be successful. And then they can reuse those and continue to use them over time within their organizations, even after I'm gone.
That's a very cool approach. So looking at your background, you kind of always done like leadership and also training, change management, right? Have you always been curious into that sector, or like what led you into leadership?
Very much so.
Okay.
I didn't realize it at the time. Back in college, I was an accounting major, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. I loved numbers. Calculus was like one of my favorite classes, and I loved the accounting classes. But I just realized most of the way through my major that just wasn't for me. And I took a few training classes and I was hooked.
Got it.
And so after I took those classes, I thought, this is what I've got to do. And I got a minor in HR concentration. And then after I left college, I took some time to actually have sales roles and do different things, thinking I needed some experience under my belt. But I just constantly had this calling to go back into training. And so there were some opportunities that I had, and I keep getting this pull back into it.
Yeah.
But I know that each one of the experiences I've had in my life has led me to where I am today, and I needed to have those things.
I think now the trend that I keep seeing is where a lot of orgs are flattening, right? What are your thoughts on that? And maybe what are some of the things that leaders can do in order to prove value, right, and stick around?
I am a huge fan of the flattened organization. Yes, because really we're all leaders at the end of the day. And so if we all have those skills to be able to influence and work well together as a team, we really don't need somebody that's telling us what to do. Like
True.
that old command and control type of mentality that really doesn't work anymore. Like, you go do this thing. People want to know the reason why, and they want to be a part of those decisions, and they want to be able to understand it and work on it together. And that's what you do with a really great team. Now, you still do need to have leaders, but that flattened organization is going to help you be able to have more team-focused type of atmosphere.
My approach is always more like a coach type of leader versus like, hey, I'm just going to be micromanaging where you're at, like what are the deadlines, that sort of thing. What are your thoughts on like being a coach versus like, hey, just like provide me updates sort of thing, like more hands off? What do you think is like, or is it like?
I am a coach, so
True.
big fan of being leader as a coach.
True.
Yes, 100% believe in that model.
Yeah.
And so when you think about a leader as a coach, that's somebody who's going to ask great questions and then shut up and listen. I mean, that's the key thing, is really being a great listener and then asking more questions to encourage that person to be able to figure things out on their own. So that way they're set up for success in the long run and know how to continue to develop from there, rather than just like, I'm coming back to you, Maverick, for the answer. What do I do next?
Exactly.
That really doesn't set them up for, or the company in general, up for success, because they're constantly having to come back. And so they don't learn to think on their feet.
Yeah. What's that quote? Like, why hire a lot of smart people if you're just going going to tell them what to do, right? Yeah. So tell me about rooted in leadership. Why rooted in leadership? What's the meaning behind that?
Yeah. I love to garden.
Okay.
And so when we were trying to figure out what the name was going to be, my husband just kept saying, Ashley, you love plants. The inside is full of plants. In fact, if I go to Lowe's, I have to be on a short leash so that way I'm not tempted to
First step is admitting you have a problem. So we got step one, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And then I also have a huge vegetable garden. So I love to grow vegetables for my family. And so I wanted to incorporate that in somehow. And also, and I believe that leaders need to be rooted in who they are first and foremost. And so if you are rooted in who you are as a leader, now you can go out and be able to help and impact others. But you think about a plant or a tree that doesn't have really great roots,
That's true.
it's eventually going to fall over, right?
Yeah.
And I've had several plants, unfortunately, that I didn't water very well for whatever reason.
That's my problem. I always kill every plant I've ever gotten. It dies, unfortunately. I don't know. I definitely don't have the green thumb.
Watering is a key step, not overwatering or underwatering. But if you don't have really great roots, it's going to topple over. And then that means that you're not going to continue to be a leader or somebody that's influential within your team. And so if you're really strong in who you are and what you believe, so that's about your values and your beliefs and your why do I exist? Why am I here as a leader? You're going to be a much better leader because you're going to have the confidence to be able to lead your team in the way that they need you to lead, not necessarily the way that somebody else is telling you to do that.
That first jump, right, is the scariest. At what point did you decide, okay, I have to make that jump? At what point did you feel ready? Walk me through that thinking. How did you get there?
Oh, I don't know that I was ever ready. I still remember the day that I turned in my notice and was like, oh,
Scary, right?
I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm a huge believer in faith, and I prayed a lot about it, and I kept having this feeling like I needed to do that. And every time that I have ever doubted, there's another sign that comes up. And so I'm also very strong in my intuition, and so I will really listen to that and lean into it. And so there will be another sign that says, no, this is the path that I want you on, and this is what I want you doing. And so that has helped guide me to remind me that, okay, yes, it's going to be scary and it's going to be difficult, but you don't grow unless it is scary and difficult. You don't grow if you're not being challenged. And that's what I needed in my life. I really needed a challenge and an opportunity to grow and learn.
What was it that sort of drove that motivation the most, though? Was it like, hey, I can't be as creative as I want. I don't have the flexibility, time management, or like you said, you just want a bigger challenge. What do you think was the biggest driver?
Yeah, no, I had an amazing job and I loved what I was doing. I was impacting field leaders in an oil and gas company here locally, and I loved it. I was doing leadership development, but yes, to your point, I wasn't really being challenged. Like I had been at this company for almost 10 years.
Okay.
And so I knew everybody and I knew all of these things. And it's an amazing company. Devon is a phenomenal company to work at with some really fantastic leaders. And every time that I'd go talk to other people, they'd say, oh, we could really use somebody that could help us with our leadership development. Or I'd talk to them about how they don't really understand change management or how to communicate very well with each other.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I could help with that. And so there was a bigger need, I felt like, outside of the organization that I could have a bigger impact than I could within. I had also created a program that was wildly successful. And we talked at the very beginning, I call myself the Chief Multiplier.
Yeah.
It was in a steady state. It was at a spot where the leaders within the organization had the ability to continue the program on in the way that it was developed. And so letting them continue to do that allows them to continue to develop. Because when you think about training, there's a certain amount that's learned when somebody's telling you something, but there's a whole nother level of knowledge that comes from you teaching somebody something. And you really understand it, and it's deep within you, and now you're able to communicate it to other people in a way that you understand it even more so than the first time.
Day one, was it scary? Did you have already sort of some clients in mind? Like, walk me through day one. You're like, okay, you open up your laptop or whatever. Like, what are the first steps that you take after that?
Yeah, luckily, one of the things that helped me out was a friend of mine was going back to work full time. And so he asked if I would subcontract on some clients that he had. And so I said, yeah,
Awesome.
that would be awesome. That would help me be able to kind of land on my feet and kind of get used to this new world that I was living in. And so I had the opportunity to be able to do that while I was building up my side of the business.
Yeah. You talk about oil and gas, and I think oil and gas is a prime example of technology being a disruptor, right? So maybe tell me about some of the challenges that leaders in oil and gas have to face, and sort of how do you walk them through that process of like, hey, this is how you can be an effective leader.
Yeah, technology is a huge disruptor right now, whether that's data or AI or just the technology that exists in general. That's what's leading this new era
Yep.
that's happening. And that requires us to be able to lead different, just like you talked about the flatter organization, we also have to understand what the data and what the technology is telling us and then be able to act appropriately. We also have to make sure that we're empowering our teams and giving them the autonomy to be able to learn from that technology and that data and figure out and make decisions on their own. So instead of me saying, oh, go and do this thing and here's the 5 steps that you're going to follow, that doesn't happen anymore. You might have a plan set out at 8 a.m. and then halfway through the day, you realize that you've got to adjust that based off of what's coming in from a technology perspective and what the data is showing you. And so that requires a person that's going to be able to think on their feet and be able to figure things out as they go.
Yeah. And specifically in industries like oil and gas, where downtime costs thousands, if not millions of dollars, you have to prove that technology is going to be worth it, right? You go out to train somebody out in the field and they're like, okay, this is one more thing that I have to do. I don't have time to do this. So I think adapting to that technology and proving that value up front is huge, right? Is that something that you did along the way with the change management?
Yeah. So my approach is really to focus on building really strong teams and really strong relationships that includes trust and psychological safety. Because when you have that within an organization, now the tools and the resources that you have to utilize or the processes that you have in place, they just kind of all fit together and they work well together. And so rather than saying, let's come in and let's say, all right, here's the technology and you need to follow all these steps in a row, it's all right, this is the goal that we're trying to get to. Here's the end place and here's the guardrails that you have to stay within. Now, you figure out where you need to go and how you're going to get there. And different people might approach it differently. And that's why it's so important from a leader perspective to be able to understand different personalities and accept people for who they are. Because I might take the direct approach, but you might take a little veer off every once in a while. And that's okay, as long as we both got where we needed to go. Or maybe it's vice versa. Maybe I'm the one that's veering all over the place.
Yeah.
But accepting people for who they are and what their individual personalities are helps you to be able to be a better leader and then helps people to be able to adopt these new things. It also creates like an understanding that sometimes I do need to challenge that person to think about things differently, but then maybe I also need to give them some support where I am helping them to be able to learn how to utilize these tools, giving them some grace in the time that it's taking them, just giving them an ear to listen to. And so being that balance when it comes to a leader.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I have learned has been super effective leading teams has been figuring out the why for each member, right? Specifically, if you talk about the workforce is getting younger and younger, right? So you have to understand what's their driver, what's their motivation, what are they interested in, right? And that could be the same person a few years down in their career. Their motivation might be something completely different, right? A person can value, hey, all I care about is money right now, right? But 5 years down the road or whatever, let's say they have a baby, they have a family now. Now it's like, I need flexibility. Time is kind of the most important thing, right? What do you think a leader can do in order to build that trust and sort of be in tune with the team that they're leading to know what's everybody's why? Ask. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like you talked about, don't just assume that you asked the one time and then it's never changed.
You'd be surprised though. A lot of leaders are like, hey, one size fits all. And I think that's kind of an old school mentality perhaps, but I think the workforce keeps getting younger and younger. And those things matter, right? Like flexibility, finding something that you believe in, like specifically the company you work for. Do I believe in what they're doing? Do I feel like I'm part of this mission, right?
Yeah, and I would say that it's not just the younger workforce. I think that exists in all of us. It's just that a lot of people had to kind of push it to the side.
True.
And not really worry about it in the past. And now that we're saying, no, this is important to this generation, hey, it's also important to everybody else as well. And so asking that question, what is important to you? And then, like I said a little bit ago, just stop talking. Don't fill in the gaps. Don't try to answer it for them. Don't try to make assumptions or whatever it is. Really ask questions and be curious about it and continue to learn so that way they can share their story. And maybe the first time that they share it, they didn't know. So ask again. Maybe they just shared something because that's what they thought that they were supposed to say, but that's not really what they felt. And so continuing to be curious about it and asking those questions to understand where they want to go and what they want to do. And just like you said, it's not etched in stone.
Right.
Things are always changing. And so continuing to check in and ask those questions is important for leaders.
Yeah, I think one-on-ones have been super effective for my side of things because I think that one-on-one, I almost don't really even want to talk about like deadlines and what we're doing. One-on-ones is really more about them and tell me, what do you need? What are you doing? What are the roadblocks? That sort of thing. Like, yes, it could come up, but I think most importantly, that's an opportunity for them to speak up and say, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I'm interested in. This is where I want to head in my career down the road, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I can understand where they're at from a deadline perspective or what they've accomplished on their tasks.
Yeah.
But from a one-on-one perspective, that's their time to be able to figure out where they're going to go or what they're going to do, or yes, just like you said, what roadblocks are in your way and how are you going to overcome those? But I'm not going to give them all the answers in that one-on-one. It's a time for them to be able to talk to me about what's going on and how they're working through things, because that helps them to be able to grow and to learn and to move on to that next phase, wherever that may be.
Yeah, and be prepared, take advantage of that. Like oftentimes somebody that's new or something like that, or maybe they haven't experienced that before, they don't come prepared for a one-on-one. They're like, well, I don't really have anything. And it's like, you always have something. Even if we're just going to talk like, hey, these are my interests, or this is like what I'm thinking about. This is where I want to go down the road. Maybe they need a mentor. Like all that stuff is super valuable and you can tackle all that. I think one-on-ones are just like the key driver to like where you want to go in the future.
Yeah. So one of the things that you can definitely do if people are having a hard time, many times it's because maybe the trust doesn't always exist. And so being able to talk to them about just their personal life and things that are going on outside of work helps them to be able to relax a little bit. And if you are genuinely interested in what's going on with them outside of work, that's the key, though. You have to be genuinely interested in them, not just asking the question to be asking the question. They should eventually be opening up because they realize, oh, that person sees me as a whole person, not just a resource or a cog to be able to complete the tasks that need to get done.
Yeah. So I saw on your website that you offer multiple things, right? So maybe walk me through what are the key services that you provide with Rooted in Leadership?
Yeah. So my favorite is Rooted in Teams, and that is group coaching. So if a group of leaders want to be able to work on specific development, we would go through a series of topics. And so each month we would focus on one specific topic. And they'd get some pre-work that they would complete, not very long, but maybe around 30 minutes to an hour. And it's over topics like this. So maybe it's like one-on-ones or communication or influence or feedback is a really popular one.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, what's an effective way to get feedback and be constructive at the same time, right? For leaderships, I think oftentimes you don't get the feedback. Maybe people are afraid sometimes to speak up, but I think that's critical. What are some of the tools for that?
Yeah, the main one that I like to utilize is the SBI model,
which
is situation, behavior, impact, and then you add to it intent, so SBII. So that's really situation. Yesterday in the meeting, behavior, you talked over Susie. And when you did that, the impact was that she stopped talking. She didn't continue sharing in the meeting, and we didn't get to hear what her great idea was.
Yeah.
Do you remember that time during the meeting the other day? Hopefully you'll say yes or maybe no. And then we can talk about, all right, so what do you think that you can do the next time that we have a meeting? and someone is sharing what's going on, how do you think that you could work to not have that same impact?
Got it. So group, also I saw individual as well, right? So you offer both group and individual.
Yep. So the group coaching, we have pre-work and then we get together for about 2 hours and we talk through the content. And so have you ever been to training before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
for sure.
What are your thoughts when you go to training?
I think it varies, right? Like sometimes you have a trainer that's super effective. You can tell they like it, they enjoy it, they motivate you to stay tuned in. And sometimes they're just like reading a deck to you and it's just like, it's hard to keep up. It's just like, I don't really want to tune in, right? So you can tell. It depends on the trainer, I think.
It sure does. Yeah. So my trainings are incredibly interactive. We have a lot of activities, a lot of discussions. But what I was finding is that we were having some light bulb moments, but there were still those people that were like leaning back in their chair and they're like, I'm just checking a box, like I'm just
The
here.
people that want to sit in the back. Right?
Oh, yes. And I would do my best to be able to include them and bring them in, but they were still they were just kind of there. And so this approach with group coaching is everybody participates. They're in small groups, no bigger than 10 people, and we talk through the content. And everybody participates in the conversation and they get involved. And so just like you're talking about with feedback, you might watch the pre-work on the SBI model and then you might come in and say, hey, I've got this situation with Susie. Here's what's going on. Here's what I'm thinking about doing, but I don't know if that's going to work. And so then we would work through that in the group to be able to help you overcome those obstacles so that way you feel more confident in applying that model when you get out there.
Okay.
And so it could be a variety of different things, but everybody comes in with their specific things that they want to work on so that way they truly understand the content. So it's not just this theory that exists out here.
Yeah.
It's stuff that you can really apply to be able to change your behavior. And so it makes a huge difference in that behavior change.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely a fan of your approach because I've seen other trainers where they're literally just reading the deck and you're just like going through the pages and that's it. Like they're not even providing any extra context or examples, nothing, right? So I think having that sort of like, crowd interaction and also some use cases, maybe like, hey, you prompt them. What are some of the things that you're facing? What are some of the challenges? That's critical.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So group coaching is one of them, rooted teams, and then individual coaching, like you talked about. So working one-on-one with people. And so if somebody has specific things that they want to work on, so maybe they're in a new leadership role, whether that's a new team or they are a new leader or whatever it may be, or maybe they've just got some specific things that they want to work on. They've recognized in order for them to get to that next level, they need to work on one specific skill. And so we'll work individually on that. They bring the topic, they bring the things that they want to work on. So it's their accountability to be able to do these things. It could also be like, hey, what's next for me? I'm kind of at this point where I don't know what I want to do and where I want to go.
Yeah.
A coach can really help with that as well. So working individually with people. And then like we talked about, the third one would be training. And so training or keynote speaking, those types of things are also available.
Yeah. What about mentorship? That's one of the things that I wished I would have had more of throughout my career. I haven't really had a lot of mentors. I've reached out to a few people, but they're always like busy. And understandably, like a lot of leaders are like worried about their career growth and focus on that, right? So what are some of the advice if people are needing a mentor? What can they do? What are some of the steps you think that people can take?
Yeah, once I got certified as a coach, I was a way bigger fan of coaching than I was in mentoring. So when you think about it, consulting is I'm an expert in whatever the topic is, and I'm coming in, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do.
Yeah.
Mentoring is also similar to that. I'm an expert in my life and what's happened, and so let me tell you what I've done to be successful. Maybe that'll work for you as well. But the reality of it is that you are different than me. Your experiences are way different than my experiences. Your background is different. Everything, like we're very different people.
For
and
sure.
so me trying to say, hey, because I've done this would be beneficial to you, it doesn't always work.
Mm-hmm.
And so the better thing to do is to coach. And people, we've talked about this a couple of times, that people can do this even if it is that you're looking for a mentor, is just to ask questions, right? So what's going on for you right now? Now, if you were looking for a mentor in me, I'd say, all right, you've got to bring the topics.
Yeah.
You've got to come in prepared and say, here's what's not working for me right now, or here's what I want to be able to develop, or what I'm struggling with, whatever it may be. You've got to bring that in so that way I can help you be able to work through that. Otherwise, it's like, well, I don't know what we want to talk about.
Right.
And I can share all these things that I've done, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to work for you.
Yeah, I think a cool strategy might be is see what people are struggling with or see where you can provide value. Start providing that value before you ask something from them, right? So start providing value, whatever that might be. Hey, I see that you're interested in this, or I see that you're trying out this. I kind of know about that. Let me help you and provide value, right? What are your thoughts on that?
You're meaning if for a mentor relationship?
Yeah, let's say like I see somebody and they're like, hey, I kind of want to like get some time on their schedule, and I'm going to provide value before I even ask for that time, right? I think that's a cool strategy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, people want somebody that cares about them. I mean, that's a great way to build trust is you've got to be able to have that I'm for you mentality rather than this is just a selfish for me type of situation. And so as if you're going into it like, hey, I want to help you and you help me and let's work together, that can be really beneficial compared to just a one-way street.
Yeah. What else? Change management. I think I saw on the website as well, right?
One of the topics,
Yeah.
but yeah, training or keynote speaking would. So group coaching, individual coaching, and then training or keynote speaking.
Cool.
The three things.
But all sort of like under the umbrella of leadership.
Under leadership. Yeah.
Okay.
So the topics that I find most beneficial. So I utilize Giant content. If you've heard of 5 Voices, I utilize that assessment to be able to identify what people's voices are. And so it's based off of Myers-Briggs. So if anybody's familiar with that, instead of having 16 personalities that you've got to be able to figure out, there's 5 voices. And it's a lot easier to be able to understand. They also have this. Speaking of technology, they have this great technology with some amazing videos out there that allow people to be able to learn about their voice and what that means for them. And so we utilize the 5 voices. And then I also have a change management, communication, crucial conversations, feedback, leader as coach. Those are all the typical topics that I get asked.
Okay. So you're kind of young into the entrepreneur sort of like realm. What is something that you've learned quickly now that you wish you would have learned before you jumped into that? Has anything been a surprise or it's kind of been smooth sailing so far?
Oh, everything's a surprise.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things. I think the biggest thing for me is that I was at the same company for 10 years and I knew everybody. I knew who to contact for what. And so when my computer stopped working, I went, oh, gosh.
There's a person for that, right?
Yes, but when my personal computer stopped working, I'm like, there's nobody, or maybe I should just call them and see if they would help me out. I ended up figuring it out, thank goodness. But a lot of those things that I realized, oh, I don't have a person for that anymore. I am the person to do all of these different things. That was probably an eye opener for me. Plus all of the, you get used to doing things in a certain, like, exactly what your tasks are going to be or what you need to accomplish and how you're going to accomplish them. All of that was jumbled up. And so now I had to relearn how am I going to utilize different technology and different ways of doing things. And so lots and lots of learning.
I don't know if you could have prepared for that. That's kind of one of the things you kind of learn as you go, right?
Yeah. And that was the key was, yes, you don't know what you need until you need it. And so it's all been learning.
Yeah. Speaking of technology, I'm sure you've sort of picked out some like apps or things that you're leveraging in order to sort of like, scale your business here. What are some cool apps or some cool tools that you've discovered and you're a fan of?
Yeah, I love Calendly
to
be able to book time. And then I utilize Wave for invoicing.
I'm a big fan of Figma, big fan of Miro, stuff like that, where you can do sort of collaborative brainstorming sort of things. Do you leverage any tools like that or no?
Haven't used any of those yet. No.
Okay.
Interesting.
Those are super cool if you're like, working in groups and you want to see real time what people are thinking and just throwing ideas out there.
So it's like a board, kind of like a...
Yeah, it's almost like it can be whatever you want. Like you can make a timeline there, you can draw. I mean, it's kind of like a tool that whatever you want it to be sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
so how are you utilizing that?
I'm using it for one-on-ones, definitely, prepared, like, hey, put some sticky notes out there before we talk. That way, like, I don't waste your time. I come prepared and I see what are some of the challenges. So I use that. Also for brainstorming, if we're going to roll out a new feature, we're going to break something down, we're agile. So using that to like break down user stories, stuff like that, sort of a prelim brainstorming sort of thing. It's super flexible. So even if somebody's not in the tech realm, They feel comfortable with using the tool and throwing ideas out there, putting their input. So it's super valuable for that. There's like low barrier, anybody can use it sort of thing.
Yeah. And then you have it out there. So that way when you're thinking about it, you can put it up really quickly and it's available remotely.
Definitely.
So that way you don't have to have the sticky notes that are on the wall.
And anybody can, collaborate. It's up to date, and you don't have to like go reach out to a drive or whatever, get this spreadsheet sort of thing. Like everything's there out in the cloud.
Yeah.
Super cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm a big believer that we're all going to go to the gig economy. That's kind of where I see the future going, where everybody does their own thing. What are your thoughts on that? Where do you think the future of work, what does that look like?
Oh, that's a challenging
It's
question.
a loaded question, right? But I just see it. Everybody, even if you're not a content creator, you kind of have to create content if you want to be out there and sort of be a voice in whatever field you're in. I think it's critical nowadays that you create content.
Well, I mean, you bring up a good point. In order for companies to be successful, they really need people that are sharing on LinkedIn and sharing about what the company is doing. And then within the organization, if we're a flat organization, a lot of them do have to be able to kind of do their own thing in a way.
Definitely.
Yes, they're still following within the realms or the guardrails that the company has set, but they've got to be able to kind of run with it and have autonomy to be able to do what's necessary. So maybe eventually someday, I don't know, I'm curious to learn more about your thoughts on it, because it sounds like you've...
I definitely have done some research around it. And the other thing that I think is really cool is I think building that personal brand. That's another thing that I've learned along the way, is building that personal brand is critical. That's something that they can never take away from you. And you just build that brand wherever you decide to go. That brand is yours, and they're going to know, hey, I know this person. And when I think of this person, this is what comes to mind.
So when they think of DJ Maverick, what do you want them to think about?
I would say somebody that's creative, someone that leverages tech, someone that's not afraid to fail. I'm a big fan of doing like quick proof of concepts. Let's throw something out there and see if there's value here before we do a deep dive. That's one of the things that I learned working previously in the government. I'll tell you a quick story. So a funny story is we had this big project. We're going to do a warehouse management system. And of course they were waterfall. So they're going to we're going to nail every requirement ever, right? We're just going to nail it, right? So the funny thing is the contract was awarded, started working on requirements. They went out and bought the hardware. By the time that the project was rolled out, the hardware was outdated.
Of course.
So after I saw that, I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. And I became a big fan of Agile and doing things, quick proof of concept. How can we provide value? And I've also picked that up along the way in oil and gas, because you have to do that in oil and gas. Oftentimes we're like, hey, it would be nice to have the Cadillac solution, but whether that be budget or time, whatever the case may be, we just can't do that right now.
Yeah. So what do you do then? Because of course the customer is going to say, but it's not perfect and it doesn't have everything that we need.
Yeah. I think providing that value, right? Like if you show especially if they see their feedback going out and they see, okay, the quick turnaround, right? Like I give them this feedback, I see it, it's tangible. I think you build that trust and they're like, okay, we're going to get there. And I'm already seeing the value. I'm invested at this point. Let's go.
Yeah, because as long as you're meeting the minimum needs, so you've got that MVP where it needs to be.
Which I hate that word. It's always like MVP, and it's like people kind of stick to the MVP, right? So I don't know.
Not a fan of that one.
Not a fan of that, but I think just providing value and just like being mindful of the feedback, right? Like even like what's the industry doing? And also I'm a big fan of what outside industry is doing as well. So I'm a big geek with startups and technology. What are other industries doing? How can we leverage that technology and put it into place to where what we're doing?
Yeah, because if you don't ever get started, just to your point, technology is moving so quickly that it'll be outdated by the time that it goes live. Not only that, those requirements that you gathered probably aren't even valid anymore.
Right.
They've already changed their requirements that they have and what they want to be able to accomplish. And so you've got to be able to move quickly to be able to.
And imagine you're like getting the requirements. They wait for, I don't know, months, maybe years, who knows, right? And then like you roll this thing out and it's like, well, that's not what I wanted, right? And at that point, you've already invested all this money, resources, everything. So I don't know. I'm just a big fan of like failing fast, quick lessons, and let's go.
Yeah, as you were saying that, the other thing that came to mind for me is a lot of people will just go find a solution.
Yeah.
And so now you're having to fight multiple battles of like, you figured out how to make this solution work in the interim while you don't have anything. And so now you're having to get them away from that thing as well as adopt a new thing. And just get them something that's valuable for them to be able to utilize. Yeah.
We were talking before we started recording about my thoughts on glasses and how that's going to be the next step. I think we're going to go from our phones to glasses. So I don't know if you've experienced the Meta glasses. So the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, they're really cool. They have built-in AI. They have a camera. They also can take video. So it's like you have an AI assistant right here on your glasses, your hands-free. I'm curious, you being in training, what are your thoughts on AR and sort of leveraging that for training? I see it's super valuable if someone's out in the field. Let's say they have to pull up a manual or something, have an AR and just like, hey, this is the part you're looking at or whatever. I think there's a lot of cool possibilities with that.
Yes, it could be the future. I think where it's going to be even more beneficial is probably in the safety space. So making sure that people are learning how to utilize whatever safety mechanisms are necessary. And so that's not my expertise at all, but it would help them be able to practice it in a safe space before they actually get out there. Same thing with learning how to utilize some of the equipment as well. You could do that. There's lots of potential.
Yeah. You were talking about wearing many hats. I think you being an entrepreneur now, the other thing you're going to have to do is be in marketing, right? Putting yourself out there, creating content around that. What are your thoughts on being your own marketer?
Yeah, I'm figuring it out. I had sales jobs way back when, and I taught sales reps a long time ago. So I'm having to brush off some of those skills to be able to remember what I need to do. But I'm also working with a lot of other people who have done this a long time. The great thing about the entrepreneur world is that there are a lot of people out there that want to see other entrepreneurs be successful. And so they work together to be able to help each other be successful in whatever way that means. So I can go out and I can ask several people questions. They all have different ways that they're doing it, but I can take all of that information and then decide what works best for me. The other thing you talked about multiple times is agile. So try it, see how that works out. And then if that doesn't work, like try another thing and see how that works. And so that's something that I'm having to get used to is it doesn't have to be perfect, that try it out, see how it works. And then try again if that's not what it needs to be.
What are your thoughts on having difficult conversations? The other thing that I see is leaders sometimes try to avoid that, right? Like, and understandably so, a lot of leaders try to like not create waves. And they're like, I'm just going to sort of like, fly under the radar sort of thing. What are your thoughts on like having the ability or the flexibility and also be comfortable to have those difficult conversations?
What happens if we don't have the difficult conversation?
Yeah, they just like want to avoid the problem and then it becomes a bigger problem.
Sure does. Yeah, the analogy that I like to use is that weed that's in your yard. And you're like, I'll just leave it. It's fine.
Next week, right?
Yeah, I'll take care of it eventually. I gotta run to the store and get the spray to put on there. I'll eventually take care of it. But then you turn around and the next thing you know, you're pulling in the driveway and you're like, oh my gosh, my yard is covered in weeds.
Yeah.
Because I didn't take care of that one weed that existed in my yard. And so the same thing is true with those crucial conversations. In fact, they get bigger. So if you've ever seen those weeds that are really pokey and they're huge and then sometimes they have those flowers on them, well, if you would have grabbed it early on, it's not pokey and difficult for you to be able to grab out of there. Well, the same thing is true with those crucial or difficult conversations, is that if we have them early on, right when they happen, they're not as bad, they're not as scary, and we can really be able to make a difference early on. And so that's a key thing with feedback is making sure that you're giving it as close as possible to the event when it happened. Because if you do that, now I remember what happened, and now I'm able to make that adjustment. That's a key thing with feedback, is being able to make it quickly when it's necessary. So now the next time that thing happens, I can relate it back to the experience that I had before, and I'm able to move on from there.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think the other thing I see too is a lot of people, if they're good at their job, let's say they're super technical, they've been there forever, oftentimes leaders will put up with a bad attitude. And to me, that kills culture. And I'm a huge believer in culture. I don't care how good you are technical. I always say you can always teach somebody to be more technical. right? But when it comes to people skills and just being a good person in general, you can't really teach that a whole lot, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
100% agree. Yeah, I've had a couple of people on various teams that have been that way, where they were like, I'm super smart and I'm super technical, and so you can't get rid of me. And
Right.
in all reality, I'm like, you know what? It's way better to have a team that works well together and that we're able to accomplish all of our goals than to constantly have to go back and say, hey, come work with the team. Hey, share the information.
It's not worth it,
Oh
right?
my goodness. No, it breaks apart the team, and then it's every man for themselves. And they're all just trying to get done whatever they can. And it's not effective. We don't get nearly as much done with those types of teams compared to the ones that I've had that are high performing, that are like, we're going to work together. So your skills are really good here. I'm a huge fan of strengths. We talked about that. Where I know what my strengths are. I know and I'm not so good at. And so identifying that in your team to be able to say, hey, you're really good at this thing. You go over and do that. And you're really good here and you're really good here. Does that work for everybody? Now let's all go out and make this happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's also a great opportunity for growth opportunities, right? Like if a person, let's say maybe they're not even that great at this thing, but they're like, hey, I'm interested in doing this thing. Let's say it's data or whatever, right? I've always wanted to learn about databases or something, right? So like that's an opportunity where they can enjoy what they're doing and sort of grow for the future as well. So that's a great example of that, right?
Yeah. I'm not so great at this, but you are. Could you kind of teach me these things and help me be able to learn? Yeah. And then that person can go off and do other things. I think that's something that holds people back is they're like, well, this is my thing.
Right.
And this is the one thing that I can do. And in reality, you want to be able to do more things. You definitely don't want to box yourself in because then you're not able to learn and grow and you're stuck doing that one thing all the time. And so having somebody else come along to be able to learn how to do that. So that way you can take vacations.
Yeah.
And you can take time off.
Exactly.
And you don't have to stress about it. And you don't have to feel like you're because that's what happens with burnout is people are constantly on and they're not able to tune out or to turn it off so that way they can actually take a break. So helping people to be able to learn how to do these other things is essential.
Also a trend I've noticed in the past where people are like super technical and then leadership is afraid to do anything. Like if we lose this person, they have X years of experience, or maybe they're the only ones that maybe they wrote this application back in the day. But to me, it's not worth it. Protect that culture at all costs.
Have you had an experience like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what happened in the end when you let that person go or move them to a different team or whatever? What happened within your
so
team?
at that point, when I experienced that, I wasn't in leadership and that person didn't want to do anything about it. So everybody on the team was miserable and just working and meetings and everything when it came to do collab, right? Everybody was miserable and everybody didn't enjoy going to work. And you would just see that on everybody's faces. So once I saw that, I was like, when I go into leadership, that's one of the things that I'm going to focus on. I don't care how technical you are, how good you are. If you're not like a good person, if you don't fit with our culture and our mission, then there's like not a lot I can do to keep you here at that point. Right.
So let's say that you identify an issue or a problem with somebody that you need to be able to give that feedback.
Yeah.
How do you know that it's something that you need to give that feedback to them?
Well, you can tell. And during one-on-ones, people like, hey, provide feedback. Hey, this person's super difficult to work with, or I tried to provide my input. They just ignore my input. You know, it starts to sort of flare up and you get that input, right? And if you start to hear things, then I think it's time to have a conversation. And you always like go talk to that person, of course. Like, hey, this is something that the team has been feeling or whatever. Maybe don't even mention the team. Just like, hey, I've noticed this and this is kind of the way that you come across, or maybe, you know, we can change some things and be proactive and see if they're willing to change. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. The key things that I took out of that was it's got to be multiple instances.
Yeah.
So if there's only one thing that's come up, I don't know. So I like the triangulation method where you've got to hear it from at least 3 different people or witness it myself. So if I'm witnessing this behavior and I'm realizing, oh, this is a detriment to the team, I probably need to address this.
Yeah.
And I need to address it early when it's a small thing. And then the other thing is that you're talking to them about it, and you're talking to them about it in a conversational way. Like, hey, I'm noticing this thing that's going on.
Right.
I don't know, maybe it's my interpretation of it. What are your thoughts? What is your intent behind doing this?
Yeah.
Because the more that you understand somebody's intent in doing something, that can help you be able to connect those dots to be able to realize, oh, well, you were trying to get your point across. Let's work on influence a little bit differently.
Right.
Let's work on our communication. Now you can really help them and provide the support that they need to be able to develop, instead of just like, oh no, you suck and you're you're doing a horrible job here.
Right.
We can there's something that we can work on to actually develop within
Yeah,
them.
it's definitely tricky at times because you don't want to call out or say, hey, this person said this about you or whatever. Like, I hate putting the team on the spot. So I definitely am a fan of like, hey, this is what I'm noticing. Like, talk to that person's, directly and not even involve the team at that point, right? Let's just have those conversations.
I mean, the other thing that I'm a huge fan of is if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm having this problem with this person, what have you done to talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'd rather have the person having the problem talk to the person that they're having the problem with, rather than me get involved, because now that turns into a much bigger problem than if they are talking to each other. So go talk to them and you guys try to figure it out and share that information. And if you still can't figure it out, then I can come work with you guys. But first, I want you guys to talk to each other, because that's what helps build that team.
Yeah, and it also empowers them, and it's another growth opportunity for the future. You're always going to work with somebody that might be a little bit difficult or whatever. So learning how to navigate that is super beneficial, right?
Yep. And we talked about those flat organizations. Many times leaders have 12 people on their team. And so they can't be the one that's in there solving all of the little problems. I think about my kids when they're having a little argument. You guys work it out. You guys need to talk to each other and figure out what you're going to do to be able to resolve that. Mom can't come in every single time. I'm not going to be here every single time to figure this out for you. It's the same thing when it comes to leadership and within an organization.
Who am I going to find on your playlist? Don't worry, this is a safe space. Nobody's watching, so tell me.
Nobody's watching. Oh, yeah. So you're going to laugh. I do have a 6-year-old little girl.
Okay.
And so our playlist is JoJo Siwa. It plays on repeat.
Yeah.
The kid version.
You sound super excited about it, by the way.
I mean, I love High Top Shoes. It is a great song. Yes. And then we also love Tyler Hubbard's 5'9". She knows that one by heart.
Okay.
And Katy Perry Roar. We were in Colorado and there was a singer out on the street and she walked up to her, confident as could be, and said, "Hey, will you play Katy Perry Roar?"
That's
and the girl was
amazing.
like, "Yeah, come on over. You sing it while I play the music."
No way.
And so my little girl walks up there and in front of a mic starts singing this song, and she knew all the words.
You got video of it?
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So that one we've got memorized, and a few others. So my playlist really isn't that exciting. My son likes more like 80s music, so Yellow Submarine, and he likes Queen. So we listen to a lot of Queen songs.
Okay. How did he get into that? That's super amazing.
When they were younger, the way that we would wake them up is we would play a song.
Okay.
And we just played random songs. That's how Katy Perry's Roar is a favorite.
Okay.
And so once they found one that they liked, they just asked for it on repeat every single morning. And so then they would learn it, and that was then their favorite song until they got tired.
That's a good wake up. Roar. That's an amazing way to wake up, right? It gets you pumped for the day. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I really like your strategy of you don't want to embed yourself. You want to like sort of empower people, right? So I think for leaders, probably the biggest takeaway, if I put you on the spot, what is something that they can do to have that same mentality? Because I think that's super powerful, and I'm a fan of that. So what would be your advice to that?
Yeah. Be a coach. So identify the things that your people need and then be there and provide that support that they need to be successful, and then let them run. Let them continue to develop, and then continue to have those conversations with them to find out what do you need and what's going on with you, and continue to provide what they need, and then get out of the way. Because the best thing that you can do is let them be able to stumble and work through obstacles that are coming up, and work through them in a safe space with you as their leader, so that way they can figure them out, but don't solve all the problems for them.
Yeah.
Because if you're constantly in there solving them, they're never really going to learn. Because then now they are more of a leader themselves. they're able to figure out how to overcome these obstacles and work towards that goal that they have. And they are then sharing that with other people. So if you can be a great role model for other people, they'll pass it on and continue to be.
Love that. So I know you're super busy. I want to thank you for your time. Before we sign off, where can people find you? Plug in your website, social media, whatever. Where can they find you?
Yep. So my website is rootedinleadership.com. You can email me, Ashley@rootedinleadership.com. And then I'm, of course, on LinkedIn, Ashley McCormick. And those are the main places.
Awesome. I want to wish you continued success. It sounds like you're headed in the great direction. It sounds like you're well on your way to scaling this. It's amazing. I'm a big fan of people pursuing their dreams. That's kind of why I started this podcast. We were talking about that, just highlighting people that are pursuing their dreams, whatever it might be, whether you're a musician, a founder, whatever. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having me today.
All right. There you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, the super talented Ashley McCormick on the Maverick Podcast. In dreams, we trust.